Hi, it's Gordon here again from Man Knitted in Scotland. A few minutes ago I recorded a video showing you how to make your first loop and how to tie new colours in. Now I'm going to show you one of the great boons that I discovered after I started fair isle knitting when I was used to catching floats, is you can employ the same principle with any knitting, even single colour knitting, to swallow up the loose tails, which saves you weaving in at a later point. That's a job I don't like. Finishing is so important to the look of your knitting, but I have to say, sewing up I'm not awfully fond of, and weaving in ends I'm not terribly fond of. But in fact, one of these hats that I knitted here, because I'm not in a rush to finish them, this navy one that I did, I decided I would start from the beginning and weave in the ends as I went. No, it wasn't that one. I'm talking absolute nonsense. It was the green one. I decided I would weave in the ends as I went, and there are no ends left. I haven't finished that in any way other than the very last bit had to be woven in, but there are no ends there. I wove them in as I went, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm sure you know already, but it's a really useful thing. So here is the piece of knitting that I tied the new colour into a few moments ago. And what I do is, I'm only knitting in one colour. I treat these two as if they're my second colour. So I hold these two. It may be one tail if you're, at the very beginning of your knitting, or it's more likely to be two if you're changing colour in the middle. I hold them in my left hand, I hold my working yarn in my right hand, and every second stitch I catch them over, and I'll show you how I do that. So I knit one, just as normal, that one goes. Next stitch, once I get my needle through, I treat these like one piece of yarn. I put my left hand yarns over the wrong way. I put my proper normal working wool over as normal, and then I take those two back off, and that has caught them under that. I can't do it every stitch because it won't work. It's only every other stitch. So I knit one, catch, knit one. I'll do it again. Needle through, over the wrong way, your own wool over as normal, those ones back off, then just knit one. And I'll do that 5 or 6 times before I stop. I'll make sure it's gone over and back 5 or 6 times, and your knit one that you do between locks it in. Now, if I turn that over, there was where my green was joined. You'll be able to see. There's where the green joined. And here's where my ends now are. I've caught them in along the wrong side of the knitting. Now I could take a pair of clippers or scissors there, and I could get as close in as I safely can and snip those. They're dealt with, and you'll see it on the wrong side of the knitting, but if you keep your tension as it should be, they won't in any way distort your stitches in the front on the right side of your knitting. They shouldn't cause your stitches to elongate, to be larger, or in any way distorted. They're just hanging in there at the back. And if you keep your tension neat, it won't be seen. I do that throughout a garment, and then I've no weaving in of ends, and it's such a boon. However, these hats, which I've just shown you, these hats that I do, they start off being knitted flat from there through the rib to here. So you've got about that much to be sewn up. And I always use my original cast-on tail to do the sewing up. I was so enthusiastic about tidying that one up that I wove in the cast-on tail as I went with the method I've just shown you. When it came to sewing up, I didn't have the bit of yarn left to sew up with, so I had to introduce a new bit of yarn and tie it, and it left me with a tail that did have to be sewn in. So don't be too overzealous about it, because sometimes your first or your last tail, your tail that's left from cast on, or the tail that's left at the end of cast off, can sometimes be quite important, and you often want to leave that longer if it's going to be used for any sewing up. And what I do in a case like this with the hat, once I get going, The tail that I've left from cast on, which I'm going to use for sewing up, I'll just take my finishing needle and I'll go back and forth about three quarters of an inch apart, however long it takes me to just get the long tail lost in there. It doesn't matter if it's seen, it's only temporary to hold it out of the way, and then when I come to sew up, I can pull it out in a winner, but it just keeps it tidy. I sometimes just do big sort of blanket stitches, just in and out, stab stitch right through all the way round the bottom of the hat, through between stitches, so that it's not trailing and it's not getting in the way. Then I pull it out when I want to sew up. It just keeps your tail tidy if it's one that you want to keep. So I hope that's useful to you. These are all just things I've picked up along the way, and many of them in later years. I don't remember learning to knit. I seem to have been able to knit all my life. I remember learning to ride a bicycle, and I remember learning to read and write, but I don't remember when I learned to knit. I think even as a small child before going to school, I had a mother who knitted quite a lot, strictly from patterns, and I had aunts who were very good knitters, and I think I used to just pick up needles and wool, and someone must have shown me at some point, but I seem to have been able to knit-wise. As I don't remember learning to do that, and I've been able to knit purl and do decreases and things probably since I was 7 or 8. I certainly can remember. I can remember my aunt getting me. She was knitting these knitted slippers, these sort of bed sock slippers, and I decided I wanted to do them too, and her telling me what to do. So I must have been able to do plain purl and decreases and things then. And I can remember the house she lived in, which she moved from when I was 9. So it must have been, but before then. Um, so, but there are so many details, like some of the things I've just shown you, that I've only really learned in later years. And funnily enough, I'm almost embarrassed to admit it's relatively late on that I finally got my head round that there is a right side and a wrong side to knitting. But it was only when I started doing Aran and Fair Isle and pattern things that I understood that there was a public side and a behind the scenes side. I don't know why I didn't grasp that, and I don't think I quite grasped until I was an adult the fact that knit stitches and purl stitches are really the same stitch, but just varies which side they show on. It's amazing the things that waited a lot that seemed to take till I was older to click into place. But there you are. Anyway, I hope these little things have been interesting. Look in again sometime. Thanks, bye.